Hello and welcome to episode 195 of the Sasuga podcast. In this episode, it's all about confidence and positivity. And as I always say, do what works for you. Ready? Here we go. You're listening to the Sasuga podcast, and you're about to discover how to excel in your work without being exhausted through practical techniques that you can start using right now. I'm your host, Helen Iwata, a bilingual Brit with a 3-decade career in Tokyo. I'm an award-winning women's success and business communication coach, speaker, writer, wife, and mother. Every week here on the show, I share my personal stories and favorite techniques around the 4 phases of the Sasuga success cycle, around self-care, planning, communication, and productivity, to help you enjoy more success and less stress. You'll also have the chance to listen in on heartfelt and eye-opening conversations with inspiring guests and hear answers to your questions to help you use your expertise, time, and energy better, and quite simply to bring more joy into your work and life. This is the Sasuga podcast. Hello, lovely listener. How are you doing? I want to start with a shout out to a very special Japanese lady who prefers to stay anonymous. And she wrote to me after last week's episode 194, where I talked about mum guilt. I also mentioned non-mum guilt. And she said, non-mum guilt ということがとても印象に残りました。私は子供がいないどころか結婚もしてないし、実家暮らしで家事はすべて母親がしてくれる。そんな環境なので、同僚のお母さんお父さんよりも時間に余裕があるんだから、自分が頑張らないと、とか、お母さんお父さんは子供の用事で仕事を休むのはしょうがない。でも、私は自分の楽しみのためにお休みを取るのは悪いこと、と思っていました。So she was giving herself a hard time because she felt she had more time than her colleagues with kids, and she felt bad about taking time off for her own fun things when they were taking time off for their kids. Now, since she's participated in several Sasuga programs and is now an active member of the Sasuga Cafe, she has realized that it's okay for her to look after herself and have fun. And in fact, that has a positive impact on those around her. And I hope today's episode helps you to feel even better about yourself and have a positive impact on those around you as I share 15 tips to feel more confident and positive. The other day, I started reading a book that I put down partway through in the past. While I remembered a few bits, I must admit that most of it seemed like I was reading the information for the first time. I'm wondering, have you ever noticed that? Maybe you watched a movie or read a book, but then you forgot a lot of what it was about. Well, that doesn't mean that you're forgetful necessarily. It's just how the human brain works. You're exposed to a lot of information every day, and to be efficient in retaining what's most valuable, your brain quickly discards information that it doesn't consider necessary. In fact, in recent years, neuroscientists have increasingly been researching this topic of what's also called active forgetting. And it seems that the brain considers information worth saving when it comes from a strong emotion or with a strong emotion, especially something like fear, and that's to protect you from potential danger in the future, or when it's repeated. If it comes up a lot, it must be important. So, in our run-up to the 200th episode of the Sasuga podcast, and that will be out on November 7th, 2022, I've prepared a 3-part series to remind you of top tips from our most popular episodes on 3 topics. The first is confidence and positivity, then communication, and then productivity, just in case you didn't absorb them all the first time round, or you're a new listener. So in this episode of the Sasuga podcast, you will hear, are you ready for this? So lots and lots of tips for you. First of all, 4 ways to quieten your inner critic, 3 steps to start to speak confidently, 4 reasons to recognize your strengths, 4 ways to stay positive, and also the changes that 6 women made. And this is to give you inspiration for what's possible. So I'm going to introduce the tips from these 5 popular episodes related to confidence and positivity. And these are also related to phase 1 of the Sasuga success cycle, which is care for you. And it's not just about self-care. It's not just about making sure you eat, sleep, and move your feet, as you may have heard me say before, but it's also about choosing your thoughts so that you feel at your best physically, mentally, and emotionally. And you may find that you can grab these tips and run with them, or you may like to listen to the whole episode for the ones that are most meaningful for you. Whether you're a relatively new listener and hearing these for the first time, or you've been with us for a while, I hope you find these useful. And you'll find the links to all the episodes in the show notes at sasugacommunications.com/195, as well as in this week's edition of my weekly newsletter of practical techniques, stories, and resources. That's Sasuga Tips for You. And if you're not already a regular reader, you can easily subscribe at sasugacommunications.com/subscribe. Okay, let's start with 4 ways to quieten your inner voice, your inner critic voice, that is. So one of the biggest struggles that women in business come to me with is dealing with their inner critic. And that's the little voice in your head that tells you you're not good enough. Many women think that they're the only one with this sort of voice, but it's hugely common, and the type of voice can be different. Sometimes it's a version of you talking, saying things like, "Oh, I'm so stupid. Why do I always get myself into these situations? I'll never be able to do that." And other times it's like someone talking to you. "You're so stupid. Why do you always get yourself into these situations? You'll never be able to do that." Whichever type of inner critic voice you have, 4 ways to quieten it are, number 1, change the words. You have the power. You can change the words. Number 2, change the image. If you have an image associated with that voice, you can change it. Number 3, change the sound. Change the sound of the voice. Make it something that you maybe won't take as seriously. And number 4, say thank you. Have some gratitude for the inner critic, because it's probably wanting to protect you. And if you want to hear more on this, check the show notes at sasugacommunications.com/195, and you'll find the link there. Okay, next is how I started to speak confidently. So people often see me now as a successful businesswoman, a confident and skilled communicator, but it wasn't always that way. When I first joined McKinsey, I felt surrounded by incredibly intelligent people, and I hesitated to speak up in meetings because I wasn't sure that I could say the right thing. I was concerned about what people would think of me. And a Sasuga Tips for You reader emailed me and asked, how did you begin to speak up from a smaller stage to a larger audience? So the 3 tips here are, number 1, step out of your comfort zone. This is really important when you are learning something new. It's going to feel uncomfortable at first. Number 2, learn the skills that are associated with speaking or with whatever new skill it is that you want to learn. And number 3, specifically for communication, if you're feeling nervous and worried about what people think about you, focus on the audience. And if you want to hear more on this, check the show notes at sasugacommunications.com/195 for the link. And by the way, if you haven't already downloaded my quick guide, 8 essential phrases for clear, confident English presentations, you can do that right now at sasugacommunications.com/8. English phrases, also in the show notes. Everything you need is in the show notes. All right, next is 4 reasons to recognize your strengths. So here in Japan and also in my home country, the UK, we tend not to talk about our strengths. We are quite humble. Have you noticed, though, have you considered that your strengths could be very important to recognize because they help you and others? So 4 reasons to recognize your strengths are: 1, contribution. When you know your strengths, you can make a greater contribution. 2, time. When you have a strength in a certain area, you can save time there. Number 3, role modeling. We need more role women. I think I just made up a new term. More role women, more role model women in certainly here in Japan. It's very often said that we have a lack of role models in terms of women in business. And also confidence. Number 4 is confidence. So you can feel more of a sense of confidence when you recognize your strengths. And if you'd also like to hear about how to discover what your strengths are and how to make the most of your strengths every day, then check the show notes. You know what the link is, I think, by now. sasugacommunications.com/195. You'll find a link there. So now you've dealt with your inner critic, you've started to speak confidently, you've recognized your strengths, but things always happen in life that can easily throw you off course. Just look at the last couple of days. And in fact, I just got a message from my daughter and she has COVID. She's fine. She'll be fine. No problem. So next is 4 ways to stay positive. So this episode was actually from the day after I was released from hotel quarantine after returning to Japan from visiting my family in the UK. So being stuck in a little room for 10 days gave me plenty of opportunity to consider the best strategies for staying positive. And this is what I came up with. Number 1, standing guard at the door of my mind. So that means being careful about what you think. Number 2, intended wins for the day. So this is a great technique. It's not only writing your priorities for the next day, but writing them as if they are wins already, that you've succeeded already, and then crossing them off when they're done. Number 3, daily gratitude. Yep, whenever you're feeling down, focusing on the gratitude is a great way to start to feel better. Whatever tiny little thing you can be thankful for. Like for me, I have a very nice cup of berry tea with me at the moment, so I am grateful for that. And number 4, a sense of humor. This is definitely a way to stay positive. Laugh about it. And finally, I want to bring back one of my absolute favorite episodes. This is where we talked about the changes that 6 women made. So in this episode, it's episode 172, I shared audio clips from 6 fabulous graduates of the Sasuga VIP Women's Coaching Program. So Emmy, she was at first overwhelmed with work and family responsibilities, and she became more confident and realized that she was good enough. And this brought a great sense of relief to her. And I'm sharing you just a snippet from each of these ladies because I really want you to get an idea of what is possible for you if you are going through a tough time at the moment. There is hope. The possibility is there. It's just really up to you to make that choice. Yoko, she'd been feeling down working at home, and she started to prioritize self-care and sleep, and she felt much better about just being herself. FT, she became more confident and got clear on her future direction. That's a really big one that comes up a lot, is not being clear on the future. Now, of course, she gained clarity about her future career. She lowered her expectations of herself and she started to take care of herself better. Haruko, she developed her confidence to present online. Yay, love that. And she reduced her overtime. She started to spend more time with her family. And Saori, she was initially hesitant to join a group of women that she didn't know, but that feeling soon went away when she found that she had so much in common with the others. And she went from working all the time to prioritizing her own gym time and more playtime with her daughter. And if you're curious to know more about the Sasuga VIP Women's Coaching Program, just go to sasugacommunications.com/VIP. And I do recommend that you get on the wait list to be the first to know the details of the next program because places are limited. Okay, today we talked about 4 ways to quieten your inner critic, 3 steps to start to speak confidently, 3 reasons to recognize your strengths, 4 ways to stay positive, and the changes that 6 women made to give you inspiration for what's possible. What was most meaningful for you in this episode of the Sasuga podcast? What tips have you used? I would love to know. Just talk to me in the comments of any of my social media posts. I'm on Instagram at Helen Iwata. I'm on LinkedIn, where you'll also find me as Helen Iwata. And you can find today's show notes if you didn't know. Can you guess what the URL is? At sasugacommunications.com/195. Repetition is the mother of all learning. And of course, there will be a link to all the episodes that I mentioned today as well. Thank you so much for listening. Make it a brilliant and positively joyful day. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Sasuga podcast. Wow, the fact that you listened all the way to the end here tells me how committed you are to your personal and professional development. If you enjoyed this episode, I invite you to tell your friends or colleagues about the Sasuga podcast. Spread the tips and the joy. Help to make everybody's lives better. And you may even like to rate and review the Sasuga podcast in your favorite podcast player to help others find it. And if you'd like to hear more from me, be sure you're regularly reading my free weekly newsletter, Sasuga Tips for You. I'll send you practical techniques, resources, and inspiration every Tuesday in English and Japanese. Just go to sasugacommunications.com/subscribe to subscribe. And I look forward to supporting you.